Well, first, let me say thank you for taking a few minutes to listen to me today as I shed light on some of the behind the scenes life of an author. I also want to cover some aspects that are applicable to debut authors, since 2020 has been a bit of a challenging year for debut authors such as myself. Um, Although I've written a nonfiction book before, this year, 2020, was my fiction debut. So that's quite a year. So first of all, let me talk about the power of story. Why do authors write? Usually we have a goal or a purpose, or a message that we want to portray in our books. So mine is to bring laughter and hope and inspiration to readers who are finding reality just too messy, too draining, or too hard. And some of the discussion lately has been that people want to read lighter fare, lighter, more humorous, more fun stuff, because reality is just too much right now. Nonfiction authors usually have a specific subject they're addressing. And so it's easier for readers to find their books, because if you type in a keyword, that book's going to come up and you're going to find the subject that you're looking to read about. So for fiction writers, it's not quite as simple as this, but rest assured, both kinds of authors have poured their hearts and souls onto the page and hoping to get their words out there. And ideas and stories need to be in the hands of readers. Most authors will tell you it's not about the sales. They just want to be heard. However, their publishers do care about money and sales. So throw everything you thought you knew about releasing a book out of the window, because the upheaval caused by the pandemic has changed everything. There's no more casual browsing through your favorite bookstore with your latte in hand and, picking out a book and looking at it and putting it back, or having book events, or, that sort of thing, because it's different now. First off, in-person book signing events and book events have been cancelled for months. And although things are opening up, it's hard to set up things because people are getting nervous. Readers are still nervous about public events. And unless you're a well-known author on the bestseller list, events online are scarce. Think about it. If you are a retailer, a book retailer, and you have a choice between showcasing a bestseller or a new author that nobody knows about, who are you going to pick? So unless the only reason they would showcase a local author is if the community asks for it. So that's where you come in, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Here's the thing. Unless an author is represented by a large publisher and is therefore got a publicist assigned to them, even if they do, nowadays, publishers expect authors to promote themselves. Bookstores have been closed for a while, and independent bookstores are struggling. And readers have to find their next read a different way. So have you browsed Amazon lately? Unless you know what you're looking for. Unless the Amazon gods are in your favor, you may get lost in that never-ending list of books that are out there. So even if you log into Chapters, or your local authors are not necessarily easily found, they're not necessarily showcased on the spotlight page, you'll find the bestsellers there. So authors who've dreamed of book signings and seeing their books next to, one of their favorite authors in Chapters, haven't seen those dreams come to fruition this year because of COVID-19. Libraries haven't been open for browsing, so there's no latest author release displays that you can look at. So what you can do is request the book at the library and put a hold on it so that you can pick it up. But how will other community members know about this book that you've enjoyed that is available from one of our local authors? Well, first of all, the biggest tool is word of mouth. And as we talked about reading today and what we enjoy, a personal recommendation about a book goes a long way. If you read a book and you come across something you think a friend will enjoy, tell them about it. Don't be shy, because authors need your voice. Remember I mentioned authors have to do their own marketing. Well, let me tell you, it's hard. it's hard for an author to toot their own horn and basically wave a flag and saying, buy my book. You know, not only does it make us uncomfortable, but most authors don't enjoy self-promotion. We can promote each other, but it's very awkward to promote yourself. Now, we don't want to also come across as tone deaf when there are so many other issues going on in the world. However, we have a value in our story, and we want other people to hear it. Speaking of noise, many publishers have pushed back the publishing date of books to September. So what happened is a whole bunch of books were released in the first week of September, hundreds of books. So that means your poor local author's book is hidden in this deluge of titles released in 1 month, and they just cannot compete. It was a challenge before to get their book noticed, but now the odds are really notched up, ratcheted up a notch or two. So if you have a creative way of helping your local author to get their book a bit more exposure, then please suggest it. Go ahead and take the initiative. Trust me, authors are looking for new ideas all the time. And if you love an author's book, how about offering to host a virtual book club for them, or offering to put promotional bookmarks at your local coffee shop, or hosting a little drive-by event? Let's get creative. Or buying a copy of that book for your friend or your sister or your mother-in-law, or the community center library, or the church library, or wherever people gather who love to read. Who knows, that author may be so happy they may name a beloved character after you. You never know. So what a lot of people don't know is that smaller publishers have what they call a no return policy. And that means big retailers like Barnes & Noble and Chapters Indigo won't stock that book on the shelf because they can't return it to the publisher. So that means that the only way you can get it physically on the shelf is to put it in a bookstore on consignment, which for me, I had to ship a box of books in from the States, which cost a fortune, and then to give it to Chapters to put or a store to put on the shelf, you're actually losing money that way. So basically, authors are relying on online sales more than ever. And audiobooks are a huge part of that. So when an author's book is not on the shelf, offer to buy it online or get it from the author, straight from them. Authors are happy to sign a book for you, or maybe throw in a bookmark or two. Why do authors ask about pre-orders? Often you can see a book come up and it's not out yet, but it's available for pre-order. How does this help an author? Well, it helps a publisher know how much to print. It also helps the Amazon sales rank when on release day, if there are already sales amassed, and then it's released with a whole bunch of sales. And the higher the sales rank, the more exposure your book has on Amazon. It's all about algorithms, and I can't even explain that to you because I don't even understand it myself. But trust me, it's about algorithms. So if a publisher puts up a book for pre-ordering and readers support that book by pre-ordering, you're usually guaranteed a cheaper price as well. But also in the publishing industry, things happen a year in advance. So for example, if my book released this month, I would have signed the contract to have that book released a year ago. So what is usually happening when this current book is being released, agents and publishers are looking at the next contract. And if the current book does well, they're more likely to give the author another contract for another book. So the sales of the first book to happen for the second book. So it's very important that authors get that kind of support. So, if you support your favorite author with the book that's being released, then there's more likely to be a next book. So as business owners and facilitators of various community initiatives, you can offer to host or spotlight a local author. Talk about a giveaway, perhaps, or giving them some sort of more exposure. For debut authors, it's not so much the sales, it's more about getting known, so people know who you are. Before the shutdowns, I talked to a seniors group about the value of fiction, and it was very well received, but unfortunately we can't do that anymore. But there's nothing better than someone saying, I don't usually read fiction, but I loved your book. Or I don't usually read this genre, but I loved your book. That spurs the writer to carry on writing and carry on creating. Writing is a solitary, thankless job and full of self-doubt and long hours of work. To be honest, at the end of the day, most writers are not doing it for the money. You might think it's a given that most authors' family are the biggest promoters and supporters. Well, this is not always the case. Sometimes authors have told me that not one of their family members have bought or read their books. So don't just assume that the family and friends are supporting. That's not always true. But I have a science fiction fan who read my book and loved it. And someone else who doesn't usually read romance gave A Promise to Keep a Try and loved it. So it doesn't always happen that way. But as an author, I appreciate that kind of support. I appreciate it when people are willing to go out of their comfort zones and read outside of their usual genre. I think it can only broaden our reading horizons, which is a good thing. All right, so what about celebrating the release of a book with an author? Well, I'm not saying you have to send flowers on release day, but if you want to, go ahead. Even a card just to say well done is appreciated. And not a lot of people know the work that goes into producing a book. But if you really want to make a difference, then leave a review of a book. If you've ever read a book that you loved by an author, leave a review on the retail site, because not only does it help the retailer to know, oh, people are reading this book, but it helps other readers to discover that book. First, you can, you can take the same review you put on Amazon, on Indigo, on Barnes & Noble, and just copy and paste it over so that other readers know that that book is a good book. Let me clarify that reviews are not for the author. Most authors try not to read their reviews. They are not even for the publisher, really, except maybe to give the publisher an idea of their star ranking. But reviews are for readers. So sites like Goodreads or BookBub are a wonderful reader-based site where you can keep track of what you've been reading. And some of them have goals, like yearly goals. I want to read 30 books in a year. And then you can keep track of how you're doing. So most reviews and recommendations are for other readers. A quick note about reviews: they can be short and sweet. Something like, I enjoyed this book, I couldn't put it down, I loved the characters, I liked the story, something like that. Basically what you're saying to, now a book review is not a book report where you rehash the entire story and pick the book apart. That's not what a review is for. They are where you're saying, hey, you're saying to another reader, hey, I enjoyed this book, maybe you will too. So be honest, but be kind. You know how Amazon comes up with, if you enjoyed this book, you might enjoy such and such a title. Well, it gives you a recommendation based on what you've read. So those recommendations and additional exposure for authors doesn't happen automatically. Once an author reaches a certain amount of reviews on Amazon, Amazon starts to promote that book to other people, letting readers know about the book. So even if you think, oh, my review is not going to make a difference, yes, it will. It may get that book one review closer to that magic number of reviews that Amazon needs for that algorithm to kick in and give your favorite author more exposure. So we want people to read our work. And if you come across a review that is helpful, click helpful or like. That also helps an author get more exposure. If an author has a platform, go and poke around on their website and comment on their posts. If you read a book and loved it, tell them, tell the author themselves. Don't think, oh, I can't approach that author. They love hearing from readers. Share your social media posts or their social media posts, because word of mouth is so important. You may have a friend who's just looking for something to read, and if they see your post, they may go, oh, that's just what I'm looking for. People are more likely to read personal recommendations about books than a cold advertisement or a flyer. Readers are the lifeblood, and without you, we don't have a job to do. We can't keep telling stories and pouring our blood, sweat, and tears onto the page without you. So make an author's day. Sign up for their newsletter if they have one. Buy a book, read it, review it, pass it around, share it, send in a note of encouragement. And little by little, you'll be making that author's day. But it also makes a difference because stories are powerful and they're important and they need to be shared. It's what binds us together, a shared experience. And, you can make a difference to people just by sharing your stories and the stories you love.